What's going on, everybody? Welcome to episode 35 of the Half Price Concessions podcast featuring Eric Westendorf. Before we get to Eric, I want to give a thank you to everybody and anybody who has subscribed to our podcast on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, Stitcher, TuneIn, YouTube, wherever you're subscribed and listening. We appreciate you being here. Make sure to hit the subscribe button. If there's a section to leave us a rating and review, please do so. That would really help us out a ton. If you're on our YouTube page, make sure to hit the thumbs up, hit the like button, hit the subscribe button as well. That way you can keep up with everything we're doing. One of the things that I think has come out of this whole pandemic of coronavirus and stuff is that us people in racing, we have a lot of free time on our hands. Probably more free time than most of us know what to do about. So I know there's been the podcast scene has been crazy. There's been all kinds of good stuff with people giving interviews that I think normally maybe wouldn't, but because of the times we're in, there's a little more free time and stuff. Eric actually reached out to me on Twitter, and I guess he'd seen our posts on Twitter at HPC Podcast, and just said, "Hey man, if you ever want to talk about Pennsylvania dirt racing, reach out." And I wasn't quite sure because I'm down here in North Carolina. I've never been to a Pennsylvania dirt race, but you know what? I found a way to do it. Anchor has a cool feature where you can reach out and do phone calls and stuff, and it's not perfect by any means, but it was a really cool conversation. Eric Westendorf is actually the announcer of the world-famous Lernerville Speedway up in Pennsylvania. Lernerville Speedway is one of the most picturesque dirt tracks you could ever see. If you ever watch it on pay-per-view or see pictures of it on Google, it is a gorgeous piece of property. They host national dirt races with the World of Outlaws Sprint Cars, the All-Star Circuit of Champions races there, the World of Outlaws Late Models race there. It is a track that runs 3 main event divisions on a regular basis. And Eric gets to be the announcer for the Speedway. He's got a really cool job. So in this episode, we talk about Eric's announcing at Lernerville, some of the history of the Lernerville Speedway, and what it's like up there in Pennsylvania, because I tell you what, Pennsylvania is an incredible hotbed for dirt racing, not just late models, but sprint cars, modifieds. They got a little bit of everything up there, and there's a lot of competition up in Pennsylvania as well among the dirt tracks. So we hit on a lot of that cool stuff, and I got to tell you, Eric, an awesome representation for the state of Pennsylvania, for the Commonwealth of Pennsylvania, for Lernerville Speedway, and it was really cool just to flush out his story, and I hope that you guys will enjoy it. I know you'll enjoy it. I know I enjoyed it, so I hope you enjoyed it. But sit back and relax. Episode 35 of the Half Price Concessions podcast with Eric Westendorf is coming up on the other side of this break. This episode of the Half Price Concessions podcast is brought to you with support from Performance Center Racing Warehouse. In addition to being the home of the PRW chassis, Performance Center offers in-house setups and consulting, plus suspension and chassis pull-down analysis, along with their fabrication shop that can re-clip your race car with the fastest turnaround in the industry. Give Roger Johnson and the Performance Center team the chance to earn your racing business by calling them today at 704-838-1400 or visit them online at performancecenter.com. That's PERFORMANCENTER.com. Welcome in once again to the Half Price Concessions podcast. And this week on the podcast, we're talking to a Yankee. Eric Westendorf, the PA announcer from the Lernerville Speedway up in Pennsylvania, joins us on the hotline. Eric, thank you for taking the time to talk to us. I got to be honest, you are the first person north of the Mason-Dixon line to be on the show. So congratulations in advance. You have invaded the South once again.
Yeah, well, it's not the first time I've invaded the South. I was actually born south of the Mason-Dixon line in Hagerstown, and I actually had never been to that track until a few years ago. My son had a basketball tournament down there, and it was off season, so I didn't get to see any racing, but I drove around the facility, and I've lived most of my life in the Pittsburgh area near Lernerville, but I did live for a period of time in Cary, North Carolina, and my family used to have a house in the Outer Banks. My mom still lives down there, so I've been to some tracks in the North Carolina area, but most of my work is in the Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania area, and pretty sure.
Oh man, well, I gotta ask you, the Outer Banks. You touched one of my heartstrings with the Outer Banks. What part?
So we owned it was like a little A-frame house, pretty near the Avalon Pier, half a block really. We're on Rocky Mount. We could walk to the beach. Nothing fancy by any means. It was pretty, and it's still there. When my father sold it, they told him it'd be worth more if he would demolish the building and just sell the property as is, because it's right on ground level. And the money down there, at least at the time, was in, the stilted 2-3 level home, multi-family. We still get down there at least once, if not twice a year, and absolutely one of my favorite places to be.
Well, you're pretty far ways away from us. You're up there in Pennsylvania. So, before we get into anything racing related, how are you and yours kind of holding up during all this kind of crazy, unprecedented time that we're in?
Yeah, I've got to be honest. I've lost some faith in the state leadership. I was kind of raised, you respect your elders, you respect authority figures. And, I'm not a Trump guy. I wasn't an Obama guy, but, I've always respected the office, and the same with the governor. But our leadership is a little bit lacking in the state. And unfortunately, we're on the western side of the state. And, most of the state of Pennsylvania is driven by Philadelphia and Harrisburg. And things are a lot worse, with the coronavirus on that side of the state. We've done a really good job out here. Our numbers are really low. He's kind of taking a regional and hopefully soon a county approach, because our region is considered to be, where we border Allegheny County, where Pittsburgh is located. And obviously a center population, the numbers are a lot higher there. So we're hoping to distance ourselves to be opened up soon. And but my faith was to talk to our state representative and one of our county commissioners today about what it would at least open the track up for some practice sessions. And hopefully in the near future, within a few weeks, we have an all-star sprint show that the series that Tony Stewart owns. It was supposed to be this Friday, May 1st, and we had a rain date already on the calendar of May 22nd. So we've implemented that, and we really hope to be racing by then. But it just depends on who you listen to, and anymore, I don't even know who to believe. So it's frustrating, but we're doing everything in our control to be ready for racing. The track looks phenomenal. Our track guys have done a little bit of manicuring. We've brought some clay off of the walls and flattened the banking out a little bit. So it's going to present a new challenge to the drivers. So that's why, another reason it's really important to try to get a practice session or two in. That way our guys have a chance to see the new track configuration. And it's not major, but it's taken some bankings out of 2 and 4, and it's been pretty top dominant the last couple of years. So it would be nice to get the drivers out on the track before we race, especially before Tony's All-Stars come in, just so that we have a chance against, the Aaron Reitzels and the Paul McMahons of the world. But we're kind of at the mercy of the governor, but had a really good conversations with local leadership today, and a lot more positive outlook than I had probably 24 hours ago.
I'm about to say the state, the Commonwealth of Pennsylvania, I should say, was really in my good graces before this thing kind of brought everything to a screeching halt. Because I remember actually watching on Dirt Vision, I think it was Williams Grove ran a Sunday show, and Carson Macedo had come up there, and I went to my dad's house and we watched it, and it was kind of like that last semblance of normalcy before everything just screeched to a halt. So I do have to give UPA posse people some credit. You're the last race I watched for a while, because I don't watch the virtual stuff. I don't know about you.
No, I haven't been able to get into it. I was, hoping to, maybe do some announcing. There was a guy around here that organized a couple. We call our weekly program Fab Four Racing. Still the only track in the country with the top 3 headlining divisions of 410 sprints, super late models, big block modifieds on a weekly basis, and then we have a really competitive pro stock division as well. So this guy had hosted. He's a streaming gamer on Twitch, I guess, and he hosted a couple of virtual Fab Four shows. And I didn't figure out how to announce it. I'd still like to reach out to Johnny Gibson and Chet Christner and find out what kind of equipment they have, just in case this does drag out longer. But I mostly got on there in the chat room and was, making fun of some of our drivers and some of the guys I know from the pits that I really can't do on the microphone because it's not very professional to do so. I'm a school administrator by trade, so I have to be pretty careful with what I say, even over the PA system. But I was kind of letting people have it in a fun way in that chat. But it didn't hold my attention. But I did have the opportunity to go out to Port Royal Speedway that same weekend, I think, that Carson won at, and maybe it was the weekend after. But right before everything shut down, I did have the opportunity to get out to Port Royal Speedway. It was just great to be back to track. 3 or 4 of our local drivers were out there. I think 3 of our sprint car guys and 1 of our late model guys. So it was nice to get in the pits and be out there and support them, and just to be out there and eat some concession stand food and watch some real live sprint car racing. So the show in South Dakota was a nice break in the action to be able to watch that live on Speed Shift. And they had some broadcast issues, but that's a good problem to have when there's so many people interested in what you're doing that it crashes their servers. But it was still a lot to handle for, Darren, Haley, and Chet. The last thing they wanted was bad PR, but I think they handled it well. Chet did a great job on the microphone explaining to people, they a lot of times Speed Shift will do that free preview on their Facebook page, and they kind of expanded that free preview till everybody got logged in. So I think they handled it well. Chet did a great job, and it was fun to see live racing again.
Yeah, I was about to say I'm really looking forward to this week. Dirt on Dirt is doing a Thursday show in North Carolina, and then Saturday I think Speed 51 is doing one in South Carolina. So it's good to see some others kind of following in those footsteps, if you will. Yep. Really want to hit you on Lernerville. I got to tell you, I've never been to the state of Pennsylvania for a race, but I watch a lot of the pay-per-views, and obviously Lernerville comes up with World of Outlaw Sprints and the late models and some of the other stuff. That place, I don't know if it's just the cameras or you can correct me, that place just seems freaking ginormous. It just seems, does the camera make it look bigger than it really is?
I think it's a combination of the camera, because we brand ourselves as a 410, 4/10 of a mile track. But the World of Outlaws scored as a 3/8. So I think the camera does make it a little bit bigger, but also the absence of a wall around, from 1 the whole way to 4, pretty much the track is wide open. If you go off the back straightaway, it's a good 100 feet down to, a pile of tires and some old, out of service equipment. So I think that plays a big part of it too, is, there's no wall to contain it. So it just makes it look, when you look off the back straightaway, you just see a bunch of hills and farmland, and it's part of the intrigue. We have an October event called the Steel City Stampede, and the fall foliage in the background of that event is just amazing. It's a great way to end the season. We usually have about 300 cars in 12 or 15 divisions. It's really a lot of fun, and it's just a true blessing to me to be able to be the announcer at that track. I grew up there. I've done some crazy things to get into that track, some legal, some less than legal. Of Peanuts and Crunch and Munch in to an outlaw show for my uncle one time for the Kiwanis that had a stand there, and we got to stay in and watch for free. Just have a lot of great memories there. So I've been there I think this will be my 14th season. But I always say it's kind of dirt therapy, and how I got into local racing again. When my parents got divorced in junior high, my mom kind of fell back in with her aunt and uncle, and my uncle is one of the all-time greats. He's won over 600 races, and we started going every Friday night, and that was kind of my escape from reality. Looking back now, there's people who go through a lot more things in the divorce of their parents, but for me at that time, that was really tough. So on Friday night, to get away for 3 or 4 hours and escape reality and get to see a bunch of race cars flying around, and it's just, and I think we still provide that dirt therapy for people where it's, I live in this whole other world that my wife and kids don't really get to see me, and they're not into racing. I have 3 boys that play sports. My 4th is just starting T-ball this year, so they really don't have the opportunity to come to the track much. So I kind of live in this alternate universe from the rest of my family, and it's just great to get away and kind of hit the reset button every Friday night. And I know, a lot of people depend on that Friday night escape, and, we just hope we can get back to it soon.
Pennsylvania, to me, and you can correct me, seems like kind of the great hodgepodge when it comes to disciplines. It's a little bit of everything, it seems like, from the outside. You guys, obviously, the PA posse and sprint car racing is well known. You run 410s as a weekly division. That says a lot in itself. I mean, we can't even hardly find 360s down here. And then you got a ton of late models, too, and big blocks as well. It seems like you guys are like trying to think of the best word to say it. hodgepodge might not be the best word, but maybe just like the collection of everything. It just seems like there's just so much. There's so much racing to go around in Pennsylvania, and you guys have so many big tracks. How hard is it for Lernerville to kind of stand out from the rest? Because you got a lot of competition in your state.
We do, and we're far enough away from central Pennsylvania where the true PA posse is, where it is sprint car country. And again, we're the only track to have that top 3 divisions, but it has its pros and cons. For the fans, it's great because it's like going to a miniature world finals every Friday night. For the drivers, it stings a little bit because we can't pay them $3,000, $4,000, $5,000 like they get paid at Williams Grove, Port Royal, Lincoln, or even out west at Attica and Fremont. Those tracks pay a lot more because they only have 1 or 2 headlining divisions. So the analogy I always use is you can only split the pie into so many pieces, and we only have so much money that we can pay out in purse to still a lot of times we're not even interested in making a profit. We're just looking to break even. We have some really nice things in place this year. We had some new sponsors step in. We have a Pad the Purse program, which gives some extra money to 2 divisions every week. Another company jumped in and did a loyalty package where if you run 7 weekly shows with us, you get a free pit pass for all the rest of the shows. And then the Thompson family that owns a track did a 10% increase across the board on the purse. So we hope that helps. And we've had a little bit of drop in car the last couple of years. And it's more of a money thing with the sprint cars. With the late model, it's really the rules package. We try to stay consistent with the World of Outlaws rules package. The World Racing Group owned our track for a while, and all of our drivers are dirt car members. So we try to stick to those rules packages. But that's asking a lot from a local late model team. So it's really tough for some of them to compete. And then, being, kind of a hotbed for late models, there's a lot of $3,000 and $4,000 shows within a 3 to 4 mile or 3 to 4 hour radius of our track. So we lose a lot of those top regional guys that don't come for $1,400 a week. And, a lot of guys don't race for points anymore. So our car counts are a little bit down in those 2 divisions. Our modified division is fantastic. Unfortunately, I haven't seen a super dirt car series race at our track for the better part of 10 years. But our weekly field is just, loaded with, some all-time greats, some current and future Hall of Famers, and then some young drivers that have a lot of potential. But on any given week, there's 7, 8, 9 cars that can win that modified feature. So, again, it's got its, pros and cons, and great for the fans, but it can be tough on our drivers.
On the announcing side, I've been pretty fortunate. I've gotten to do some small tracks, and then I've gotten to do like Charlotte Motor Speedway and the dirt track at Charlotte. And I've always heard people try to tell me like that don't know any better, and like, oh, the big track's got to be easier. And I'm like, no, it's got its own set of its own set of challenges just from the announcer standpoint. Especially because you're a lot further off the ground and it's a little harder to get. You can't just climb down a ladder and run to the pits. What are some of the challenges on your announcing end that you kind of have to go through there at Lernerville that maybe you wouldn't at old Podunk Speedway where there's 500 people in the stands?
Yeah, we have the luxury of having a really great fan base. On a bad week, we probably have 1,500 in the stands. On a week, on our opening night, fireworks night, we're probably closer to 3,000. World of Outlaw shows, we can be anywhere from 5,000 to 8,000, depending on how good the weather is. For the Firecrackers, our 3-day World of Outlaw shows. For the Silver Cup, if Tony Stewart, Casey Kane, Kyle Larson, Christopher Bell come, sometimes that'll double our attendance because you're pulling in, that NASCAR crowd that may not otherwise come. But I really wouldn't say there's a whole lot of challenges. I was the PR director there for 10 years. So I do a lot of my own stats. I know a lot of the drivers. We have mostly the same drivers every week, so it's not really learning a whole lot. When there are new guys that come in, I typically get there about 2 hours for the race start. So I have an opportunity to go through the pits and introduce myself to the new, drivers that are there, make sure I'm pronouncing their names right, get their sponsors, because it's important to, promote their sponsors just like ours. So I think the biggest challenge is probably getting all that stuff in on a Friday night. People don't come to the track to hear a 2 or 3 hour commercial, but our marketing partners, the people that sponsor the race cars, want to get that return on investment. So it's my job and responsibility to try to do as much of that organically as possible. And people say that's it just kind of rolls off my tongue, and I've found ways to organically do that without making it look like a series of 30-second sponsor reads. But I had some really good training, and try not to get emotional, but I kind of came into announcing in a very tragic way. Our announcer died 4 years ago tomorrow. I was on a Little League baseball field on a Saturday morning and got a phone call from our trophy girl and said, "Did you hear about Dow?" And no, I just talked to him last night because we had canceled that Friday night. And his longtime partner, they never got married, but she had died the summer before, maybe 2 summers before. And he just wasn't really his normal self after that. He was still fantastic on the microphone. He was a radio disc jockey, was his regular job. And he announced high school and college sports in the Latrobe area. So I had done a couple Saturday races in the fall whenever football season came around. But, Friday night we rained out. He went to a movie by himself. And, when the crew came to clean up the theater after the movie, he was sitting there dead in his chair, just died of a heart attack. And I still believe he died of a broken heart. So I was just kind of thrust into the position, can you help us out? Can you announce for a week or two until we find somebody? And 4 years later, they still haven't found anybody. So I just try to have fun with it. And, I learned a lot from him in terms of the professional side. I grew up with a guy named Mike Dutko as a track announcer. And I don't want to say that Mike was unprofessional, but he was kind of unconventional. He liked to have fun. So and like I said, I'm an education administrator by trade. So I try to have some fun with it. I try to be as professional as possible. And I also try to educate the fans, because on any given Friday night, we could have people there for the first time. We all know what a redraw is. We know what the flags mean. Most of our fans know how the points are earned and have a relationship with all of our drivers. But every night there's new people there that don't understand anything. They just happen to, spend $40, $50 of their, hard-earned money to bring their family to the track. So, it's also my job to educate those people of what they're seeing. We have a lot of third-generation drivers who, their grandfathers race with us. They're in, grandfather and dad may be in the Hall of Fame, and they're in their teens and early 20s racing with us. And that means a lot to our fan base. But to, Johnny Newcomer, it doesn't mean a lot. So just making those connections and explaining what they're seeing and who these people are is a big part of my job as well.
I was about to say, I feel that same thing, because like you said, you want to be educational to the person that's there for the very first time, but you also don't want to just bore to death the diehard that's as diehard as you are, that's there in the stands every week that you're announcing. So I feel your dilemma on that one. I face the same thing as an announcer. That's got to be pretty cool though, with the multiple generations. I know just from a few guys that I follow, Freddie Raymer and a bunch of these other guys, and now everybody's kids are racing. It's for me, and I'll let you kind of elaborate on it. For me, it's the weirdest thing is not so much seeing the kid or the young person. It's seeing the person, the father, the grandfather that used to be in that role, and now you see them transition. And it's funny because not all of them handle it well. It's like they're so much more fidgety on the sideline watching than they ever were as a driver.
Yeah.
Can you attest to what you've seen?
In between my period of being a fan and working at the track, I worked on a sprint car for a few years. The driver's name is Chad Hill. I was, just happened to take a part-time job at his pizza shop when I came back from Cary, North Carolina. And, he said, "Are you into racing at all?" I'm like, "Yeah, I go to Lernerville every Friday night." He's like, "I just bought a sprint car. Do you think you could help me out?" Like, I'm kind of a fan. I'm not very mechanically inclined, but, I'll do the best I can. And, learned a lot with him and went out on the road. And he is the brother-in-law of Ed Lynch Jr., who has done a lot of national racing. He's retired now. Ed Sr. is a Hall of Fame driver, one of the all-time greats in our area. Ed Jr., the Apollo Rocket, was nicknamed for both of them. Has over 100 sprint car feature wins at our track. He's won a Silver Cup Outlaw race. He's won multiple All-Star races. So his son, Cy Lynch, is one of our top drivers right now. But huge shoes to fill. And, there's a lot of pressure on him. And, the benefit of knowing Dale Blaney as well. And Dale and I were talking about it, I think, last year in the pits. And, Dale said, it's just, it is, the expectations come from everybody, but, it comes down to just getting in the car and winning races. And if you win races, it doesn't matter who your dad is. But it's a lot of pressure for those guys. And, there are some strained relationships. Ed Jr. and Cy, see things a lot differently, and they kind of butt heads in the pit sometimes. And, but, at the end of the day, it's, carrying on that family name and tradition. And it's helped Cy get a lot of sponsors and some opportunities. He got the race at the Knoxville Nationals and Kings Royal last year and did an awesome job. It was, we always hate seeing our drivers not be there on Friday night, but to follow them on, Dirt Vision and share with the fans that, Cy set fast time one night and won his heat race another night. And it was just great to see his rise to national attention. And, he has a really bright future, but it is tough on those drivers. We have a couple others, Brandon Madison, AJ Flick in our sprint division are also third generation drivers. Both grandpaps are in the Hall of Fame. Both dads were multiple time feature winners. They both seem to have really good relationships with their dads. And Mark still races occasionally. Mark's more of a modified guy. That's AJ's dad. Brandon and Brent Mattis still race together all the time. So, but that's, those are just a few names of the history of Lernerville Speedway, and we've been there for 50 years. So it does span 3 generations, and there's a lot of drivers and a lot of names that, are in the all-time wins list and historical track champions, and to see their kids come through is really awesome. But, to see the drivers, you can tell they still want to get out there and race, but, they know their time has come and gone, and, it's either not safe for them to race or, they're putting all their money and blood, sweat, and tears into letting their sons race and even some of their daughters race. So it's an interesting dynamic to see, and we just have the benefit of a really rich history of that at our track.
One of the things I've noticed in announcing is if you're fairly decent at your job and you're professional at it, your phone number gets passed around like a pretty girl's phone number. Like suddenly everybody wants to give you a call, wants to say, hey, will you come freelance this show? Will you come do this show? Have you gotten to announce anywhere other than Lernerville, or were you kind of just stuck to
I've had some opportunities, and every time I go to a track, the announcers at those tracks will, especially the local tracks, will give them the opportunity to get on the mic for, 3, 4, 5 minutes between a race and talk about what we do at Lernerville as opposed to, the track that I'm at. But, we've always taken the approach of, what's good for the local racing community is good for Lernerville Speedway. Without those other tracks, we wouldn't have all those drivers. And without Lernerville, some of those tracks wouldn't be in existence. We all rely on each other. We are competitive with sponsorship because, it's critical to run the track, but we do share a lot of the same marketing partners in this area. And as a longtime radio personality in this area, Rapid on Racing, I think, has been around almost as long as Lernerville Speedway. It started as a Monday night program on AM radio, and it's now a weekly podcast. So I've had the opportunity to announce or to be on that show both as a guest and as a co-host. I am Blanket Hill Speedway is a little go-kart micro sprint track that's opening up here again soon. It's been closed more than it's been open in the last decade, but I told them I'd help them out with their opening night. But for the most part, my announcing has just been exclusive to Lernerville Speedway.
Well, hey, there's nothing wrong with that. I'd say you picked a fine track to be exclusive to. I mean, you didn't pick old.
But part of it is, again, my boys. I have 3 boys
one.
that play. Up until this year, they've all played baseball. My oldest is starting to focus on basketball. He's 14 years old, about 6'3", and can already dunk a basketball. And he was going to play some AAU ball this summer, but broke his ankle right before this all happened. So it turns out he couldn't have picked a better time to get hurt. He hasn't missed anything at all. But when the boys all play baseball and they're all split up age-wise, so they're very seldom on the same team. So usually on Saturdays and Sundays, we're at ball fields all over the place, and I just can't get to any other tracks. But it's when I get to go out to the other tracks, it's great to be there and support our local drivers. And I try, another thing I try to do on Friday nights is promote those Saturday night tracks, because we do rely on them staying viable, because, the more tracks out there, if guys can race 2 or 3 nights a week, it makes more financial sense for their sponsors to to get on the cars as opposed to just running once a week. So I try to promote what they're doing and encourage our fans to go out and visit those tracks because we do all rely on each other.
Do you run into a lot of guys there in Pennsylvania that maybe it's, maybe they have side jobs, but they're able to do racing as a primary source of income, or is that kind of a thing of the past? I feel like someone told me maybe in the 80s and maybe the early 90s that was a thing.
We don't have very many.
Or is that kind of changed?
I think for the most part, Dale Blaney, Tim Schaefer, I think racing is their primary job, but I know Dale, when he was hurt, was even doing, some side work, and not sure what Tim does in the off season, but most of our drivers are, and that's another thing that really ties them to our fans is they're all, members of the workforce. So, we try to highlight that, this guy's a welder, this guy's a police officer, this guy's a school teacher, because it does tie in, to our fans. They're not full-time professional racers with silver spoons born in their mouth. They're guys who, work their ass off 60 hours a week, Monday through Friday, and, so that they can afford to go and race. Some of them, remortgage and refinance their homes to do what they do and, race off of a credit card. And, it's crazy the means that people go to put a race car on the track. But most of our guys are, hardworking, blue collar, 40, 60 hour a week guys that, have the same passion that we do. They just are fortunate enough to be able to get out there and race, and something that I could never afford. Growing up, my family didn't have a whole lot of money. I make a pretty good, income now, but with, 3 or 4 boys, it doesn't go very far. And my wife would never let me get in a race car. So, my fix comes from the social media, PR, and announcing side of it. We all have our roles, we all have our strengths, and that's what makes our whole thing work.
I've never thought about doing that. That's a really good idea that you were just talking about, identifying guys with their jobs. Because like you said, I don't work with anybody that's a professional race car driver in my scene. So
I can't take any credit for it.
That's pretty smart.
That's something that our announcer, Doc Carnahan, has done for a long time. And, some guys are a little bit weird. They don't want, fans to know what they do and where they work, but most of them, are proud of what they do. And it just goes a long way to, making more connections with the fans.
Oh, yeah. I agree with that completely. At Lernerville, you guys have touring series that come in. You talked about the All-Star Circuit of Champions. World of Outlaws comes there, both sprint cars and late models. How does your role change, if at all, when those national touring series come in? Because most of them have their own announcers.
When Johnny Gibson comes in, you just let Johnny do his thing. I just stand back and watch. My wife hates the sound of his voice. She hates when I turn on Dirt Vision. So,
my wife said the same thing.
I do,
but I love
Johnny.
He's
a Pittsburgh guy. He's
brilliant.
I usually just let them do their thing. And when I can, on the commercial breaks, I'll jump in and try to help out our fire department by reminding people to get 50/50 tickets and stop on our concession stand. But for the most part, when those national touring series come in, I just let their announcers do their thing.
Cool deal.
Yep.
Cool deal. I've always wondered about that. So, here's a little inside baseball between us announcers. One of the hardest things to do, I know, at least for me, is filling time. Filling time, if it's like a long caution or a red flag, that has been always something I've struggled with. I'm sure where you're at, you got a lot more people looking at you than I do. What tips can you give me on filling time? Do you have any games?
I do. I'm quite
What do you do?
long-winded if you haven't noticed that in the first half an hour here. But part of that's being a teacher, and you have to fill a half an hour, 45 minutes. Part of that is just leading presentations, but we have the privilege of having a lot of marketing partners, and as I said, trying to get all those sponsor reads in is really tough. So I try to organically tie those in, when they sponsor divisions or events. The last couple of years, I've gone to a format like the Outlaws and the All Stars use, where we tie a sponsor's name to each of the heat races. I'll say this caution is courtesy of Bill Herrera Towing, because it's one of our towing companies, and they're out there doing the towing. I'll promote the upcoming events, but I do try to engage fans on social media, and kind of taking that cue from Blake Anderson. He does a lot of that with Twitter and Speed Shift, and I guess now they're on Flow Racing. But just helping, again, it's an interaction thing. There's so many options that people have for their entertainment dollars that we also have to be engaging and have them be a part of it. So, instead of them coming up to the press box and interrupting, either me as the announcer, our PR guy, or our scorer with, hey, can you say happy birthday to Tommy? Instead of doing that, we have them put it on social media. I primarily use Twitter on race nights. So if they have a wedding or a birthday or an anniversary that they want to announce, and then we'll do some contests too of, we'll do some giveaways, and we'll do trivia on the front straightaway. I think just this past year broke we had a T-shirt slingshot, so we'd roll up T-shirts real tight like beer cans and rubber band them and launch them into the stand. So when I was a PR guy, that was one of my favorite things to do. I solicited a lot of T-shirts from our marketing partners because our fans, and myself included, are walking billboards. So it's a great way to get your logo out into a fan base that is very brand loyal. So at the end, I'd always save one of those rolled up real nice, and I'd launch it, and it would go over the top of the we have some open air boxes at the top, so I'd shoot one over top of the grandstands, and everybody would cheer. So that was a lot of fun. But we just try to get the fans engaged and enjoying what they do, because we know that once you get the kids hooked, they're going to bug their parents to bring them back. And, we're really trying to build the next generation of race fans, because our fan base is getting older. It's hard to compete with TikTok and Instagram and Snapchat. So, we try to provide some fun family entertainment. We have a couple of drivers' wives who do a great job with our kids club. We try to get some, kids every Friday night down to Victory Lane with us and in the pace truck, and do whatever we can to connect the fans with the drivers and make them feel like they're part of the event instead of just attending.
I tell you what, the birthday thing, I swear, for every birthday I've announced, there's been 20, 30,
Right.
40 people to rush the tower. Oh, by the way, it's such and such's birthday. And I'm like, you know what? I finally there was a guy at Friendship Motor Speedway in Elkin, North Carolina, that told me, he said, here's what you need to do. Just collect them all at once, and just knock it out at one time, and don't take any more submissions.
Speedway is a track up here, and one guy that used to help me out at the race at Lernerville is helping Thunder Mountain out now with some of their PR stuff, and he's their backup announcer. So he's been having these roundtable discussions on Zoom, at the late model drivers one night, stock drivers one night. So I gave him the idea, well, let's do a announcers roundtable. And Rick Eshelman was on it with me, and Dustin Jarrett from Dirt on Dirt, and then some of the local announcers in our area. And you talk about getting 6 announcers together, a bunch of, long-winded airbags, and it was about 2 hours, but we had a lot of fun. But the one announcer, we were talking about the birthday thing, and one way to slow it down, I guess some tracks do, if you want something red, you have to donate $1, and they'll donate all that money to some charity every night, or, they'll put it in a tire fund, something like that. The announcer doesn't get the money. It goes to a good cause, but it does slow people down of, maybe I'll just save that dollar and go grab a hot dog instead. But if that's what it takes to make a kid feel special, and, maybe that kid's dad is a doctor, attorney, or a business owner, and, finds that, niche where, his son hears his name over the PA system, and, maybe that guy becomes one of the next sponsors, or sponsors one of our drivers because we took them to victory lane and the driver gave them their hat or the trophy. We have a few drivers that they've won so many trophies in their career, they just don't have space for them anymore. So they'll look for somebody in the stands or in victory lane to give their trophy to. And you want to talk about building a lifelong fan. I mean, that's about as good as it gets. So yeah, we try to be as engaging as possible. And if we have to announce some birthdays, then small price to pay, I guess.
Yeah, about to say birthdays, anniversaries, and then the one that always got me was there was a track I went to one time, and they had a prayer list, which was kind of cool, but you'd get some funky names on that thing, and you're just like, man, I wish I knew what Bubba's government name was so I could properly pray for him. But yeah, hey, there's always something. Here's one. I'll get you out of here on this one, and I have found I've been doing this for 10 years, and my fulfillment moment, the kind of moment where I kind of get my payback for it, has changed. It used to be when I started, just seeing enough people in the crowd that would cover the purse and we would not lose a lot of money. And then now, in the last couple of years, it's been seeing the first time winners and getting to interview them, because that is such a raw emotion. And I've always told people, I'm like, I don't care how tired and grumpy and sore my throat is, and I'm hungry because I don't get to eat while I announce. Seeing that kind of puts me over the top. What for you is kind of that payback moment where you're like, yeah, I'm pretty darn lucky I get to do this.
That's a big part of it, especially one of our late model track champion last year. I've known him most of my life. We actually, I even said in Victory Lane, he and I had a gym class together in high school. He's been racing so long. I think we're both 44. He's been racing that long. His dad died in a car wreck more than a decade ago, a racing accident. So to see a kid that grew up in the shadows of the track and has raced for, the better part of 20 years, if not longer, to finally win a track championship was really, really special. But he appears to be allergic to the microphone in Victory Lane. Man, a few words. Great guy, comes from a great family. Said I've known him a long time. It's hard to get more than one or two words out of him. So, you kind of, some drivers, you hand them a microphone and you got to take it away from them because you got to get the show moving. And some guys like Kenny Schultenbrand, you've got to kind of, urge along and kind of lead them with questions. But Tyler Dietz is another one of our young drivers, and he won our Pro Stock championship last year and finished second in points in his rookie year in the late models. And, he's a kid, he'll tell you he grew up in the trailer court across from the track. A lot of Friday nights, spent the last money their family had to get into the track, and all he ever wanted to do was race. And now he's winning races and winning track championships. And just to see that emotion, from him and his family, and there's so much of that. But me being, in education and a coach of a lot of sports, having 4 kids of my own, just seeing, that, again, the fan interaction and, seeing the look in a kid's eyes when a driver gives him a trophy or, signs his T-shirt. And one thing I always find really cool is, and it happened again last weekend, walking through Walmart, I passed the family, and as they're walking away, I hear a little kid say, "Mommy, that's the guy from Lernerville." So, and that's just, really cool because, that you're making an impact on somebody and you're providing entertainment. And, I come back to the dirt therapy thing that maybe that, the 4 hours of our track is the best thing that they do all week. So that's just, those kind of interactions, the human element of it is really special.
Well, Eric, I appreciate you taking the time, my friend. Wish you and yours nothing but the best. Hope y'all stay safe, and hopefully, by the grace of God, this thing will get on out of here and we can get back to living our normal dirt life. And I think we'll all have a better appreciation for it.
We certainly hope so. And I really appreciate being on your podcast and we'll try to make arrangements for you to be on ours. We started one a couple years ago, and big on podcasts with fantasy football, and I'm a Star Wars junkie, and I love Wing Nation and Open Red, so I'm always looking for new podcasts because I usually have a pretty good commute. I've been working from home the last month, so I'm a little bit behind on my podcast, but try to make arrangements to get you on ours and then learn a little bit about you. But I appreciate what you guys do. I know a lot of time and energy goes into these podcasts, and just privileged to be the first north of the Mason-Dixon line, and hopefully that'll open the door for some more.
Thank you for listening to yet another edition of the Half Price Concessions Podcast. Be sure to subscribe to our podcast on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, Stitcher, TuneIn, Overcast, Himalaya, Castro, whatever podcast app you're using. Please hit the subscribe button. If there's a section to leave us a rating and review, please leave us a good one. It would really help us out a ton. Also, if you're listening on our YouTube page, hit the subscribe button there. That way, you'll get notified every time we put out new episodes. Also, you can email the show. The email address is halfpricedconcessionspodcast@gmail.com. You can email us questions, concerns, ideas for future episodes, anything and everything. We'll definitely respond to it, and we just appreciate you listening. Also, if you have friends or family who want to listen but don't want to go to YouTube and don't have a podcast app, you can listen to every episode on our website. That's www.anchor.fm/HPC podcast. Thank you for listening. My name is Tyler Williams, and I hope that you have a great day.